October 23, 1935. 11:47 p.m. The Palace Bar on 139th and Lenox wasn't supposed to close early. Wednesday nights meant jazz, gin, and money moving through back rooms while Duke Ellington's music bled through the walls. The kind of place where Harlem's night economy breathed, numbers runners settling bets, policy bankers counting slips, working women nursing drinks between shifts. But tonight, the music stopped at 11:30. The bartender, a thick-armed man named Claude, locked the front door 17 minutes early. He told the last 3 customers the pipes burst. A lie. The pipes were fine. What wasn't fine was the message delivered 40 minutes earlier by a white man in a gray suit who didn't ask permission to walk past the bar and straight into the back office. Dutch Schultz's collector. He didn't sit. Didn't drink. Just put an envelope on the desk in front of Raymond Cole, Bumpy Johnson's numbers lieutenant for the Northern Territory, and said 6 words. 50%. Starting Monday. Non-negotiable. Raymond was 31 years old. He'd been running policy slips since he was 16. He knew every bodega, barbershop, and church basement from 125th to 145th Street. He collected from grandmothers betting nickels on dream numbers and porters playing their birthday digits. His cut was 10%. Bumpy's organization took another 15. The remaining 75 went back to the streets, paying out winners, keeping the system trusted. Dutch Schultz wanted half of everything. Not a partnership. Not a negotiation. A takeover. Raymond stared at the envelope. Inside were new collection routes, new drop points, new names. Dutch's names. His men were already positioned. The infrastructure was already being built around Bumpy's network like a noose. Tell your boss, the collector said, we're not asking. Then he walked out. Raymond sat alone in that back office for 11 minutes. He didn't open the envelope again. He didn't need to. He understood exactly what this meant. Dutch Schultz controlled the Bronx. He controlled parts of Manhattan's policy rackets through violence and political connections that ran all the way to Tammany Hall. He had cops on payroll, judges in his pocket, and a reputation for putting rivals in rivers. But Harlem wasn't the Bronx. Harlem belonged to Bumpy Johnson. And Dutch Schultz had just walked into another man's kingdom and planted a flag. Raymond finally stood. He locked the office, walked through the empty bar, and nodded to Claude. The bartender unlocked the front door without a word. Raymond stepped into the October cold and started walking south toward 127th Street. Toward Bumpy's apartment. He knew what Bumpy would say. He knew what would happen next. What Raymond didn't know, what nobody in Harlem knew yet, was that Dutch Schultz had made this same move 3 months earlier in Newark. The local boss refused. 2 weeks later, his nephew was found in a car trunk with his hands wired behind his back. Dutch didn't bluff. And Bumpy didn't bend. Raymond turned the corner onto 127th, hands shoved in his coat pockets, breath fogging in the street light. Somewhere behind him, 3 of Dutch's men were already watching. Raymond Cole had a daughter. Her name was Agnes. She was 8 years old. She had her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubborn jaw, and every Tuesday and Thursday after school, she walked to St. Philip's Episcopal Church for piano lessons with Mrs. Ellsworth, who charged 50 cents a session and didn't ask where the money came from. Raymond's wife, Lorraine, had died in childbirth with their second child. The baby didn't make it either. That was 1930. 5 years ago. 5 years of Raymond raising Agnes alone, working Bumpy's numbers operation, keeping his head down, keeping his daughter fed and safe and away from the streets that paid for her piano lessons. Agnes didn't know what her father did. She knew he worked nights. She knew men called him Racy and spoke to him with respect in the barber shop. She knew they had a nicer apartment than most, 2 bedrooms, heat that worked, a radio, but she didn't know why. Raymond wanted to keep it that way. He reached Bumpy's building at 12:14 a.m. A brownstone with a red door and a man named Thomas sitting on the stoop smoking a cigarette. Thomas nodded once. Raymond went inside. Bumpy's apartment was on the 3rd floor. The door was already open. Bumpy Johnson sat at his kitchen table playing solitaire. He was 48 years old, broad-shouldered, with a scar along his left jawline from a razor fight in 1923. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. No jacket. No gun visible, but Raymond knew there were 3 in the apartment, 1 in the kitchen drawer, 1 under the couch cushion, 1 in the bedroom closet. Bumpy didn't look up from his cards. "You're late," he said. "Had to close the bar," Raymond said. "Claude nervous?" "Claude's smart." Bumpy laid down a red queen on a black king. "Tell me." Raymond pulled the envelope from his coat and set it on the table. Bumpy glanced at it, didn't touch it. "Dutch's man came in at 11, Raymond said. "Didn't ask. Didn't negotiate. 50% of all collections starting Monday. New routes. New drops. His people already positioned." Bumpy placed another card. His face didn't change. "He say what happens if we refuse?" "Didn't have to." Bumpy nodded slowly. He finished the row, then leaned back in his chair and looked at Raymond for the first time. "You have a thought?" Raymond hesitated. This was the question that mattered. Bumpy didn't surround himself with yes men. He wanted soldiers who could think. Raymond had been with him for 9 years. He'd earned the right to speak plainly. "Dutch has the muscle," Raymond said. "He's got political protection we don't. He's got cops who'll look the other way. We fight him straight up, we lose people. Good people." "That's not a thought," Bumpy said. "That's a weather report. I asked what you think we should do." Raymond's throat tightened. He thought about Agnes. About Mrs. Ellsworth's piano lessons. About the apartment with heat that worked. "I think we can't give him Harlem," Raymond said. "We do that, we're finished. Every operator from here to Brooklyn will know we folded. We'll be out of business in 6 months." Bumpy smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. "So we fight." "We fight smart," Raymond said. "Dutch expects muscle. He expects a war. We don't give him that. We make it expensive. We make it messy. We make it political." Bumpy stood. He walked to the window and looked down at the street. Thomas was still on the stoop. A couple walked past, arm in arm, laughing about something. "Dutch Schultz isn't afraid of messy," Bumpy said quietly. "He's made a career out of messy. You know what happened in Newark?" Raymond knew. "Then you know he doesn't stop," Bumpy continued. "You hurt him, he comes back harder. You embarrass him, he makes an example. You try to make it political, he's already got the politicians." Bumpy turned from the window. But here's what Dutch doesn't understand about Harlem, he said. This isn't the Bronx. These aren't his streets. Every runner, every policy bank, every number writer, they're not working for me because I pay the best. They're working for me because I'm from here. Because their mothers know my mother. Because when the cops roust them, I'm the one who makes the call to get them out. He picked up the envelope and held it. Dutch thinks this is about money, Bumpy said. It's not. It's about whether Harlem belongs to Harlem. Raymond felt something cold settle in his chest. He knew what was coming. I need you to do something, Bumpy said. And Raymond knew, before Bumpy said another word, that his daughter's piano lessons were about to cost more than 50 cents. I need you to find Vincent Cole's brother, Bumpy said. Raymond blinked. Vincent Cole's dead. I know he's dead. Dutch killed him 3 years ago. But his brother Peter is still breathing. Last I heard, he was running a speakeasy in the Bronx off Arthur Avenue. Small time. Quiet. What's he got to do with this? Bumpy sat back down at the table. He didn't touch the cards. Vincent Cole worked for Dutch until he didn't. Then he went independent, started hitting Dutch's beer trucks, kidnapping his collectors for ransom. Made Dutch look weak. You remember how that ended? Raymond remembered. Vincent Cole got gunned down in a phone booth on 23rd Street. February 1932. Dutch's men emptied 2 Tommy guns through the glass while Cole was talking to his lawyer. Peter Cole has been waiting 3 years for payback, Bumpy said. He's been quiet because he's smart. But he's still got connections. Still got men who hate Dutch. And right now, Dutch is spreading himself thin. He's pushing into Harlem, keeping operations running in the Bronx, managing his beer distribution. He can't be everywhere. You want to start a war between Dutch and the Coles? I want Dutch looking over his shoulder, Bumpy said. I want him spending money on protection instead of expansion. I want him wondering if every bar he owns is about to get firebombed by someone with a grudge. Raymond's hands were sweating. And if Peter Cole says no? Then you offer him money. $50,000 to make Dutch's life difficult for the next 60 days. He doesn't have to kill him. Just needs to be loud enough that Dutch has to respond. $50,000. That was more than most Harlem families made in 10 years. Where's that money coming from? Raymond asked. Don't worry about that. But Raymond was worrying. He was worrying because Bumpy's plan meant going into the Bronx, Dutch's territory, and approaching a man whose brother died bloody because he challenged Dutch Schultz. He was worrying because if this went wrong, it wouldn't just be Raymond who paid. It would be Agnes. When do I go? Raymond asked. Tomorrow night. Peter runs a place called Valentino's. He's there every night from 10 to midnight. You go in, you ask for a private conversation, you make the offer. Simple. Nothing about this was simple. Raymond stood. He started toward the door, then stopped. What if Dutch already knows? He asked. What if he's already got people watching Peter Cole? What if this is exactly what he expects us to do? Bumpy looked at him with something close to sympathy. Then you'll find out tomorrow night. Raymond didn't go home. He walked to 132nd Street, to a basement apartment where his cousin Marcus lived. Marcus was a cook at the Cotton Club, kept strange hours, didn't ask questions. Raymond knocked. Marcus answered in an undershirt, smelling like fryer grease. I need a favor, Raymond said. 20 minutes later, Marcus was dressed and walking toward Raymond's apartment on 140th. He had a key. His job was simple: stay with Agnes until Raymond came back. Tell her Daddy had to work late. Make her breakfast if it came to that. Marcus didn't ask why. Raymond watched him disappear around the corner, then started walking back toward the Palace Bar. It was nearly 2 in the morning. The streets were empty except for a few drunks and a police cruiser rolling slowly past without stopping. Inside the bar, Claude was counting receipts. Need a drink? Claude asked. Need information, Raymond said. You know anyone who's been to Valentino's? The place Peter Cole runs? Claude's face went carefully neutral. Why? Because I'm going there tomorrow night. Claude put down his pencil. He studied Raymond for a long moment. I got a cousin who worked there last year. Washing dishes. He said Peter Cole's paranoid. Sits in the back. Doesn't trust anyone he didn't grow up with. You walk in there asking questions, you might not walk out. I'm not asking questions. I'm making an offer. Same thing to a paranoid man. Raymond leaned against the bar. His reflection stared back at him from the mirror behind the bottles, tired eyes, thin face, a man who looked older than 31. You ever think about getting out? Raymond asked. Out of what? This. All of it. Claude shrugged. Every day. Then I think about what I'd do instead. I can't cook. Can't build. Can't read well enough to keep books anywhere legitimate. So I pour drinks for gangsters and cash their dirty money and hope I'm useful enough they don't decide I'm a problem. He looked at Raymond. You asking because you want out, or because you think you might not get the chance? Raymond didn't answer. He pushed off the bar and walked toward the door. Behind him, Claude called out. Ray, whatever Bumpy's got you doing, make sure it's worth it. Raymond stopped with his hand on the door. It's never worth it, he said. But we do it anyway. He stepped into the cold October night. Somewhere across the river, Peter Cole was pouring drinks and counting money and waiting for a chance that would arrive in 21 hours wearing Raymond Cole's face. And in a warehouse on the edge of the Bronx, Dutch Schultz's men were loading shotguns and making a list of every person in Bumpy Johnson's organization. Raymond's name was third from the top. Raymond arrived at Valentino's at 10:17 p.m. The speakeasy sat between a butcher shop and a laundromat on Arthur Avenue, unmarked except for a red light above a basement door. Raymond knocked twice, paused, knocked once. The pattern Claude's cousin had told him. A slot opened. Eyes appeared. Who sent you? Nobody sent me. I'm here to see Peter. Peter doesn't know you. He will. The eyes studied him. The slot closed. Raymond waited, counting his heartbeats. 37. 38. The door opened. The man behind it was white as a doorframe, with cauliflower ears and knuckles that had seen too many fights. He patted Raymond down, found nothing. Raymond had come unarmed on purpose, and jerked his head toward the stairs. The basement smelled like cigars and old beer. 20 tables, half of them occupied. A piano player in the corner working through something slow and minor key. Men in suits, women in dark dresses, everyone drinking like Prohibition never ended. Peter Cole sat in the back corner. He was smaller than Raymond expected. Thin face, receding hairline, wire-rimmed glasses that made him look like an accountant. But his eyes were his brother's eyes, cold, calculating, patient. Two men flanked him. Neither looked friendly. Raymond approached. The piano player hit a wrong note and corrected. Someone laughed too loud at the bar. "Mr. Cole," Raymond said. "My name is Raymond Cole. I work for Bumpy Johnson in Harlem. I'd like 5 minutes of your time." Peter Cole didn't move. Didn't blink. "You come into my place," he said quietly, "and tell me you work for Bumpy Johnson like that's supposed to mean something to me? It means I'm here with a business proposition. I don't do business with Harlem. You did business with Dutch Schultz once." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. One of Peter's men stepped forward. Peter raised a hand, barely a movement, and the man stopped. "Careful," Peter said. Raymond's mouth was dry, but he pushed forward. "Dutch is moving into Harlem. He's trying to take over Bumpy's operation. We're not rolling over. But we know Dutch has resources we don't. Political connections. Muscle. So we're looking for ways to make him focus elsewhere. Elsewhere meaning here. Meaning anywhere that costs him money and attention." Peter took off his glasses. Cleaned them with a handkerchief. Put them back on. "How much?" $50,000. 60 days of pressure. You hit his trucks, you burn his warehouses, you make him think Vincent's ghost came back. You don't have to kill him. Just make him bleed." Peter smiled. It wasn't a pleasant smile. "Bumpy Johnson wants to pay me to finish what my brother started. Bumpy Johnson wants to pay you to keep Dutch busy while we handle Harlem." Peter leaned back in his chair. He looked at his two men, then back at Raymond. "Let me tell you something about Dutch Schultz," Peter said. "My brother thought he could fight Dutch and win. You know why? Because Vincent was smart. He was ruthless. He knew Dutch's operations inside and out. He had good men, good guns, good information." Peter leaned forward. "Dutch killed him anyway. Shot him in a phone booth like a dog. And you know what Dutch did after? He sent flowers to my mother's house. White lilies. With a card that said sorry for your loss." Raymond felt his stomach twist. "So when you come in here," Peter continued, "and offer me money to poke the bear that killed my brother, you need to understand something. I already know how this ends. Dutch doesn't lose. He just makes everyone around him lose slower." "Then why haven't you left town?" Raymond asked. "Why are you still here, running this place, if you're so sure Dutch wins?" Peter's jaw tightened. "Because leaving means he won. Then help us make sure he doesn't." For a long moment, Peter said nothing. The piano player finished his song. Someone ordered another round. Life continued around them while two men negotiated violence. 60,000, Peter finally said. "Half up front. And I want something else." "What?" "When this is over, if you actually survive, I want a piece of Harlem. A small piece. A policy bank on the east side. Something Dutch can't touch because it's yours." Raymond hadn't been authorized to offer that. But he nodded anyway. "Deal." Peter extended his hand. Raymond shook it. And that's when the front door exploded inward. 4 men came through, not crashing, not running, just walking with purpose. They wore long coats. Their hands were in their pockets. The piano stopped. Peter's men reached for their guns, but Peter raised his hand again. Wait. The lead man was tall, with a thin mustache and eyes like ice chips. He walked straight to Peter's table, ignored Raymond completely, and dropped a newspaper on the table. The Daily News. Today's edition. The headline read, Schultz gunned down in Newark chop house. Raymond's vision tunneled. The room spun. Peter grabbed the paper, scanned the article. His face went white. When? Peter whispered. Last night, the tall man said. Somebody walked into the Palace chop house around 10:30. Dutch was in the bathroom. They shot him, his accountant, his bodyguard. Dutch lived long enough to make it to the hospital. Died 2 hours ago. Raymond couldn't breathe. Dutch Schultz was dead. The man who'd sent collectors into Harlem. The man whose envelope was still sitting on Bumpy's kitchen table. Dead. Which meant? Who sent you? Peter asked the tall man. Charlie Luciano. And there it was. The twist Raymond hadn't seen coming. The piece Bumpy hadn't mentioned. Because Dutch Schultz hadn't just been moving into Harlem. He'd been making enemies everywhere. And while Bumpy was planning to use Peter Cole as a distraction, someone else had solved the problem permanently. The tall man looked at Raymond for the first time. You're Bumpy's guy? Raymond nodded, unable to speak. Tell your boss Charlie says he's welcome. And tell him the commission wants a meeting. Next week. Brooklyn. We're reorganizing everything Dutch controlled. Harlem's policy stays with Bumpy, but we need to talk about the rest. The man turned and walked out. His 3 companions followed. The speakeasy was silent. Peter Cole stared at the newspaper, his hands shaking. I waited 3 years, he said softly. 3 years. And I didn't even get to pull the trigger. Raymond stood. His legs felt weak. The money, he started. Keep it, Peter said. I don't want your money. I wanted Dutch Schultz dead. And now he is. But I didn't do it. So I don't get paid. That's how this works. He looked up at Raymond, and his eyes were hollow. You tell Bumpy Johnson he's lucky. He's lucky somebody else moved first. Because if you'd come to me yesterday, before Dutch died, I'd have taken that deal. And then 50 men would have died for nothing. Raymond walked out of Valentino's in a daze. Dutch Schultz was dead. The war was over before it started. And Raymond had just learned that the entire plan, the distraction, the pressure, the 60 days of violence, had been rendered meaningless by a single bullet in a Newark bathroom. He stumbled into an alley and vomited. Raymond made it 3 blocks before he had to stop and lean against a brick wall. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Dutch Schultz was dead. Charlie Luciano had moved first. The war Bumpy was preparing for had been erased by someone else's bullet. Which meant Raymond had walked into the Bronx, offered $50,000 to a dead man's enemy, and negotiated a deal that would never happen, all while Dutch's body was already cooling in a Newark hospital. Bumpy had to have known. The thought hit Raymond like a fist to the stomach. Bumpy had sent him to Peter Cole knowing Dutch was already dead. Or maybe not knowing, but suspecting. Either way, Raymond had been the test piece, the expendable man sent to see how the streets would react, to gauge whether Peter Cole was stable or desperate, to measure the temperature in the Bronx while the real power players made their moves. Raymond pushed off the wall and started walking. He needed to get back to Harlem. Needed to see Agnes. Needed to... A car pulled up beside him. Black Packard. Engine idling. The rear door opened. "Get in," a voice said. Raymond knew better than to run. He got in. Bumpy Johnson sat in the back seat, a cigarette burning between his fingers. He didn't look surprised to see Raymond. Didn't look concerned. "Did you hear?" Bumpy asked. "That Dutch is dead?" "Yeah. I heard." "Did Peter take the deal?" Raymond almost laughed. "Does it matter?" "Answer the question." He was about to. Then Luciano's man walked in with a newspaper and told us Dutch got shot last night. Peter said he didn't want the money anymore. Bumpy nodded slowly, like this confirmed something he'd already suspected. "Did you know?" Raymond asked, his voice raw. "When you sent me, did you know Dutch was already dead?" Bumpy took a long drag from his cigarette. "No. But I knew he was going to be." Raymond stared at him. "Charlie Luciano's been planning to eliminate Dutch for 6 months, Bumpy continued. Dutch was too wild, too unpredictable. He was drawing too much attention from the feds with his tax troubles. The commission decided he was a liability. They just needed the right moment. And you knew this. I knew Charlie was moving. I didn't know when. That's why I sent you to Peter Call. If Dutch was still alive, we'd need the distraction. If he was dead, we'd need to know how his former enemies would react to new leadership. Either way, we needed information." "You used me," Raymond said quietly. "I used you for exactly what I pay you for," Bumpy replied. "To handle business. To make connections. To represent Harlem in rooms where I can't be. You could have told me. If I told you Dutch might already be dead, would you have approached Peter Call the same way? Would you have negotiated with the same urgency?" Raymond had no answer for that. Bumpy stubbed out his cigarette. "You did good tonight. Peter Call respected you enough to be honest. That matters. And now we know he's not coming for Dutch's territory. He just wanted his brother avenged. That's useful information." The car rolled through the Bronx, heading toward the bridge. "What happens now?" Raymond asked. "Now we go to Brooklyn next week. We sit down with Charlie and the commission. We make sure they understand that Harlem's policy operation stays independent. We pay tribute, we play nice, but we don't get absorbed into their structure. And if they don't agree?" Bumpy smiled, but it was tired. "Then we have the same problem we had with Dutch. Just with smarter people." The car crossed into Harlem. Raymond watched the streets pass, his streets, the blocks he'd worked for 9 years, the corners where he collected nickels and dimes from people who trusted him. "I have a daughter," Raymond said suddenly. Bumpy turned to look at him. "Her name is Agnes. She's 8. She takes piano lessons on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She doesn't know what I do. She thinks I'm a businessman. You are a businessman. You know what I mean." Bumpy was quiet for a moment. "You want out?" Did he? Raymond had asked himself that question 100 times. 1,000. But he'd never said it out loud to Bumpy. "I want her to have a choice I didn't have," Raymond said. "Then keep doing your job," Bumpy replied. "Keep making money. Keep her in school. Keep her away from these streets." And when she's old enough, she'll have those choices. But right now, tonight, you're in this life. And you need to decide if you're going to do it halfway or all the way. The car stopped in front of Raymond's building. All the way means you trust me, Bumpy said. Even when I don't tell you everything. Even when it feels like you're walking blind. Because I'm trying to keep all of us alive in a world that's changing faster than we can control. Raymond opened the door. Agnes is inside? Bumpy asked. My cousin's with her. Good. Go kiss her goodnight. And tomorrow, you go back to work like nothing happened. Because as far as Harlem knows, nothing did happen. Dutch Schultz got killed in Newark by somebody else's hand. We were never involved. We were never planning anything. We're just relieved the problem solved itself. Raymond stepped out onto the sidewalk. Ray, Bumpy called. Raymond turned. You did good tonight, Bumpy said again. You walked into a dangerous room and walked out alive. That counts for something. The Packard pulled away, leaving Raymond alone on the street. He climbed the stairs to his apartment. Marcus opened the door before Raymond could knock. She's asleep, Marcus whispered. Asked about you twice, but I told her you'd be back soon. Thanks. Marcus left. Raymond locked the door behind him and walked quietly to Agnes's room. She was curled under her blanket, breathing softly, her face peaceful in the dim light from the street. Raymond sat on the edge of her bed and watched her sleep. She'd never know how close he'd come tonight to not coming home. She'd never know that her father had gambled with their lives on a deal that dissolved before the handshake was cold. She'd just wake up tomorrow and ask him to help with her arithmetic homework. Raymond bent and kissed her forehead. I'm sorry, he whispered. For what, he wasn't sure. For the life he'd chosen. For the risks he couldn't stop taking. For the fact that her piano lessons were paid for with money from a world she'd never understand. He stood and walked to the window. Somewhere in Newark, Dutch Schultz's body was being prepared for burial. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Charlie Luciano was celebrating a successful hit. And somewhere in Harlem, the streets were already forgetting that Dutch Schultz had ever tried to take them. By Friday morning, Harlem knew. The word spread through barber shops and church basements, through policy banks and corner stores, carried by runners and whispered over morning coffee. Dutch Schultz was dead. Shot in Newark. The white gangster who'd tried to muscle into Harlem had been erased by his own people. But the streets didn't celebrate. They waited. Because everyone who'd lived through the beer wars of the 20s, who'd watched territories change hands in blood, who'd seen what happened when power vacuums opened up, they knew better than to think Dutch's death meant peace. It meant uncertainty. At the Palace Bar, Claude served drinks and listened. Men came in with theories. Dutch's organization would collapse. No, his lieutenants would fight over the scraps. Charlie Luciano would absorb everything. The commission would divide it up like a pie. Somebody said the feds had done it. Somebody else said it was the Jewish mob settling old scores. Nobody said Bumpy's name. That was intentional. On Friday afternoon, Raymond walked his usual route. He collected from Miss Ida at the beauty parlor on 135th. She'd hit for $12 on a 3-digit number and smiled like she'd won a fortune. He stopped at Morty's newsstand where the old man slipped him policy slips wrapped in newspaper. He checked in at the barber shop where Clarence ran a book in the back room. Everyone asked the same question, "We good?" Raymond gave the same answer, "We're good." But he saw the fear in their eyes. These weren't soldiers. They were working people trying to survive on the margins, betting pennies in hopes of dollars, running slips because it paid better than hauling garbage or scrubbing floors. Dutch's 50% demand would have crushed them. His death had saved them. They just didn't know Bumpy had been preparing to fight back. They didn't know about Peter Call or the $50,000 or Raymond's trip into the Bronx. They only knew that the wolf at the door had died before it could break through. At 4 p.m., Raymond stopped at St. Philip's Church. Agnes was inside at her piano lesson, her small fingers working through scales while Mrs. Ellsworth counted time. Raymond stood in the doorway and watched. Agnes saw him and waved, then turned back to the keys with fierce concentration. She hit a wrong note. Corrected. Kept going. Mrs. Ellsworth noticed Raymond and smiled. She's getting quite good. Natural talent. She gets that from her mother, Raymond said. The lesson ended at 4:30. Agnes ran to Raymond and grabbed his hand. Can we get ice cream? It's October. It's cold. Ice cream tastes better when it's cold outside. Raymond laughed, a real laugh, the first in days. That doesn't make sense. It does to me. They walked to the drugstore on 138th. Raymond bought her a chocolate cone. They sat on the bench outside and watched the street. A group of boys played stickball. A woman hung laundry on a fire escape. A cop walked past and nodded at Raymond. Normal life. Simple life. Agnes talked about school, about her friend Doreen who'd gotten in trouble for talking during reading time, about the spelling test next week she was worried about. Raymond only half listened. He was watching the street, looking for signs of change. Looking for Dutch's men who might not have gotten the message. Looking for trouble that might still be coming. But the street was just a street. Daddy? Agnes asked. Yeah, baby? Are you okay? You seem sad. Raymond looked at his daughter. Her chocolate-covered smile. Her bright eyes. I'm not sad, he said. I'm just thinking. About what? About how close I came to losing this. About how your piano lessons almost cost us everything. About how the man who wanted to take our world died before I had to choose between keeping you safe and keeping my job. About how lucky I am, Raymond said. Agnes leaned against his shoulder. Can we do this every Friday? Ice cream in October? Just sitting. Talking. I like it. Raymond put his arm around her. Yeah. We can do this every Friday. That night, Raymond returned to the Palace Bar for a meeting. Bumpy had called together his key people. 12 men and 2 women, all of them lieutenants running different pieces of Harlem's policy operation. They gathered in the back room while Claude locked the front door. Bumpy stood at the head of the table. No notes. No papers. Dutch Schultz is dead, he said. You all know that. What you don't know is what comes next. The room was silent. Next week, I'm meeting with Charlie Luciano and the commission in Brooklyn. They're reorganizing everything Dutch controlled. They want to make sure we understand the new structure. What new structure? Someone asked. The one where they run New York and we pay tribute to operate in peace. Murmurs around the table. A woman named Stella spoke up. We paying Dutch's 50%? No. We're paying 5%. A tribute. a sign of respect. In exchange, we get protection. No more independent operators trying to muscle in. No more wars. The commission keeps order, we keep working. And if we say no, another man asked. Bumpy's face hardened. Then we end up like Dutch. Dead in a bathroom because we became inconvenient. The room went quiet again. I need to know right now, Bumpy said, if anyone here has a problem with this arrangement. Because if you do, you walk away tonight. No hard feelings. But you don't work for me anymore. Nobody moved. Good, Bumpy said. Then we move forward together. Business continues as normal. Collections stay the same. Payouts stay the same. The only difference is 5% goes to Brooklyn. And in return, we get something Dutch never had, stability. Raymond watched the faces around the table. They were scared, but they trusted Bumpy. They'd followed him this far. They'd follow him further. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. People filed out quietly. Raymond stayed behind. You did good with Peter Cole, Bumpy said when they were alone. He respected you. That's rare for him. He wanted revenge. I offered money. It wasn't complicated. It's always complicated, Bumpy said. You just made it look simple. Raymond started for the door, then stopped. Why 5%? He asked. Why not negotiate lower? Because 5% is sustainable. It's enough that Charlie feels respected, but small enough we can absorb it without hurting the street-level operation. Any lower, he'd think we're insulting him. Any higher, we'd be working for him instead of with him. You had this number ready before Dutch died. I've had this number ready for 2 years, Bumpy said. Ever since I heard Charlie was organizing the commission. I knew eventually they'd come for Harlem. I just didn't know when or how. Dutch forced their hand early. But the result is the same. Raymond understood now. This wasn't about Dutch at all. It was about Charlie Luciano. About the new order taking shape in New York's underworld. Dutch had just been the excuse to accelerate what was already inevitable. Get some rest, Bumpy said. Big week coming. Raymond walked home through streets that felt different somehow. Quieter. Calmer. The war that almost happened was over. But Raymond couldn't shake the feeling that another one was just beginning. 3 weeks later, Raymond received a package. No return address. Just his name written in careful block letters on brown paper. It arrived at the Palace Bar. Claude brought it to him with raised eyebrows. Raymond opened it in the back room. Inside was a photograph and a handwritten note. The photograph showed Vincent Cole's grave. Fresh flowers had been placed on it, white lilies. The note read, "He would have liked you. PC." Raymond stared at the image for a long time. Peter Cole had sent flowers to his brother's grave using the money he didn't take from Bumpy. The same flowers Dutch had mockingly sent to their mother. But this time, they meant something different. Raymond tucked the photograph in his coat pocket. The meeting in Brooklyn had happened. Bumpy had negotiated the 5% tribute. Harlem's policy operation remained independent but acknowledged the commission's authority. Charlie Luciano got his structure. Bumpy got his protection. Everything had worked out. Except Raymond couldn't stop thinking about the envelope, the one Dutch's collector had delivered that Wednesday night. The one that had started everything. He'd never asked Bumpy what happened to it. That Friday, Raymond took Agnes for ice cream like he'd promised. They sat on the same bench. She talked about her spelling test. She'd gotten an A-. She was disappointed. Raymond told her an A- was excellent. "Daddy," she asked, "why do you always look at people when we're sitting here?" "What do you mean?" "You watch everyone. Like you're waiting for something." Raymond realized she was right. Even now, even with Dutch dead and the commission settled, he was scanning faces, checking corners, measuring distances to doorways. "Old habit," he said. "From what?" "From work." Agnes tilted her head, studying him with eyes too observant for 8 years old. "Your work seems stressful." Raymond almost laughed. "Sometimes." "Yeah. Maybe you should get a different job." "Maybe." But they both knew he wouldn't. Because this was the job that paid for piano lessons and A- spelling tests and ice cream on Friday afternoons. This was the job that kept them in an apartment with heat that worked while families 3 blocks over slept 4 to a room. This was the price. Agnes finished her cone and wiped her hands on a napkin. "Can I tell you a secret?" "Always." "Sometimes I'm scared you won't come home." Raymond's chest tightened. "Why would you think that?" "I don't know. I just do. Sometimes I wake up and check if you're there." Raymond pulled her close. "I'm always there, baby. I'm always going to be there." It was a lie, and they both somehow knew it. But it was the lie that let them keep sitting on this bench, eating ice cream, pretending the world was simple. A block away, Claude was opening the Palace Bar for the evening. Policy runners were collecting slips. Numbers were being called. Money was changing hands. The machine kept running. Dutch Schultz was buried in the Bronx. Charlie Luciano was building an empire. Bumpy Johnson was protecting Harlem. And Raymond Cole was raising his daughter in the margins, trying to give her a choice he never had. The photograph of Vincent Call's grave was still in his pocket. White lilies on dark earth. A reminder that in this life, even victory carried ghosts. The streets of Harlem moved on. But the people who walked them never forgot. Power doesn't die when a man dies. It just changes hands. And every hand carries the weight of what came before. If this story made you feel something, hit that like button and subscribe. The algorithm doesn't care about history, but maybe you do.